Burn your eyeballs.
Mm-hmm. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Motion Design Hotline. I'm one of your hosts, Evan Abrams, joined by our other hotter host, Kyle Hamrick, steaming it up over there. My fingers were burning up on the buttons trying to get us into the show today.
Yeah.
Kyle, how you doing?
Great. Actually, it's a very comfortable temperature in my office here, just to clarify. But
well, we'll see if we get roasted over here. Today on the program, as we do most times, we're going to be answering some questions, some quandaries, some troubles in After Effects. Today, though, we'll be responding to questions all about responsive design. So,
see what we did there? It's an opportunity to be even sillier than usual.
Yeah. I'm trying to think. We're gonna respond to replay. It's got to be something else. Responsive is a big word. It's got too many syllables. But the idea is when we change this. I think the question was when I change the size of the frame, I have to move and scale all of the elements manually. Ouch! This hurts. Please make it stop. Right. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be talking about systems and techniques and methodologies, not necessarily getting too into the weeds. We're going to be talking a lot about kind of design and structure, right? That's what we're talking about.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, your examples are going to be using some expressions to get there. But, in After Effects, this is an extremely deep rabbit hole if you want to build a million little pieces that all look at one another. This is a little more high level, and I'm going to be showing a lot of examples in Premiere, which actually is a place that you can do a lot of this more easily a lot of times. And folks, especially who are already After Effects users, may not realize that you have a lot of these tools available to you without having to do a bunch of coding to set it up.
Yeah, and so hopefully it'll be a good even split between these. Hopefully we show you some things that maybe you haven't used before. I want to say hi to everybody in the chat who's hanging out. Nikisha, thanks for hanging out with us.
I want to say hi only to Nikisha. How about that?
Yeah, exactly. But Umacore, of course, Apruva PR. Who else we got? Cody Bear holding it down. Joshua. Lots of flame emojis going on over here.
Yeah, I think I kind of started something. It got a little out of hand.
Yeah, well, I mean, we're more milk toast than we are spice toast, so we'll see.
Speak for yourself.
I'm trying to think. If you have questions and problems, you should send them to us. So if we're not talking about something you want to know about, you can always let us know. We'll respond to you, of course, in the chat. But there's a link in the description where you can go to our form, fill out the form with your problems, and we'll get to them. It'll turn into a whole show.
You can even send us project files and stuff. Sometimes that's something that we can kind of take where you've gone and turn that into a whole thing.
Yeah, it's a lovely bit of business. If you're stuck, let us break you free. That's what we do, I guess. And
we'll burn through the chains that are holding you back.
Sure.
I guess.
Yeah.
We're gonna stretch this metaphor as far as we can.
And it's so you can also go to motiondesignhotline.com, a real website for real people where you can enjoy project files that will respond to your, I guess, commands on them.
To your clicks.
Yeah, exactly. I mean,
old episodes that will respond to your play and pause and next. Yeah. It's a whole thing. And you could get a hat that will respond to the shape of your head.
Sure. Yeah. Be like hat. Respond to the shape of your head. So I think that's pretty much it for our kind of housekeeping stuff. We are here every Monday. So, see you next time if this isn't good for you. But hey, Kyle, maybe we should start. Let's start on my side, and then we'll ping pong back to you, and then we'll come back to me, and we'll try to bounce
if we must.
Okay.
All right. Well, yeah. So just know that if you're here for the premiere, that I'm going to get to that soon enough after Evan does whatever whatever nonsense he's up to here.
Whatever he's doing over there. Or maybe we should start in Premiere. I don't know. Is with people in the chat.
Look, I don't know. We can't possibly ask them because then we'll have to wait for 20 seconds awkwardly.
Yeah, that is the tough part. Well,
yeah.
okay, let's go to my screen. I'll give you a little preview of what I've kind of built out for us to enjoy. So here is a super basic kind of idea. We have an object, in this case, a shape layer, and that shape layer I want to respond to the size of the composition. And actually, you know what? This is maybe another step further down the road. Let's go back one step. Here we go. A more basic version of this idea. You
got to say all that in reverse first.
Sure. Zifner. I can't do it.
I broke Evan. All right. Sorry.
Guys, I've been taking improv classes on the weekend. We haven't gotten to saying a sentence backward yet as a thing. I still gotta write it down. I'm an amateur still, so I'll get there eventually. But let's say, for example, we got a thing, right? Here is a thing. It happens to be in a scene. I'm gonna place it in a certain place. I know that this composition, that hopefully you can see this nice tall and thin drink of composition here, and I'm gonna just go ahead, change the composition settings. Here's the dialogue. Let's go ahead and make it wider. Oh, as it's getting wider, things are changing. Stuff's changing in the scene. What's going on?
Whoa.
I'm going to change it down to a 1080 by 1080. Maybe I won't lock the aspect ratio. Let's just go square it up. Oh, look at this. Things have changed, right? This is responding to what I've done to it. So that is the hope, that we are able to get a thing to respond to the composition's width and height change. Now, a lot of that, if people are not sort of aware, if you're kind of new to expressions, don't worry. It's not scary. The math is, in fact, not even complicated. It really stems from understanding what we can grab onto. So inside of After Effects, we have access to pointing at things. So what we're doing, if we break it down into human language, would be, I want the position and scale of this layer to respond to the width and height of the composition. And we know that those are all objects that we can point to. So these are, and they're all numbos, right? These are all just numbos that we can, that's my super adult word for numbers. And that's
it's your cool word for numbers.
That's my really cool and interesting way to say numbers. I won't demean your intelligence. I'm going to say numbers the right way. So, yeah, I demean my own intelligence when I make these jokes. So I'm going to be exploring referencing a specific corner. We're going to look at absolute offsets. So I want this to be 20 pixels away and then 20 pixels away like that. So it's bumped in by 20 pixels. So if I were to alter the size of this thing, it's not going to be 1080 wide. It's going to be 1920 wide. Would you look at that? It is still referencing this corner over here. It's still 20 in, 20 in, right? If you were to do this relatively, I would say, well, I want it to be a certain percentage in. Well, let's make it 10% in and like 20% down. You know, that is a way of saying where this corner should be at a certain place. So relatively, it should always be at this ratio away from that corner. All right, let's go ahead and find out if that's true. So I'm going to go into the composition settings, and let's go ahead and bring that back down to 1080. Oh yeah, look at that. That is indeed at the same percentage away from there. So these are kind of the different ways that we can think about where things are. They can be absolutely relative, or they can be, we'll say, ratioed, and I'm no stranger to getting ratioed, so this will be a really common type of thing. Nobody likes my tweets. They only dunk
X's, upon them. Zeets.
Sorry, yes, my posts. People love to dunk on my posts. So that's where I'll be going with this. And then we'll talk a little bit about scaling, because if we were to scale this object, as you've seen, it's been scaling. We have to, again, think of the methodology that we want that to work on. And If you are scaling based on something, is it the width of the thing we scale to? Is it the height of the thing we scale to? Is it both? You'll probably most often encounter this when you are seeing things like scale to fit, scale to fill, stretch to fill. These are all just rules, right? And what's really great, if you're in After Effects, you are making the rules. In so few areas of our lives, we get to make all the rules. In After Effects, you can make the rules whatever you want. You are the undemocratically elected leader of whatever project you're making. You control it entirely, and it's just your own little world. Maybe that's why I like it so much. No, I'm a social democrat. That is not true. So that's where I'm going with this. But Kyle, in Premiere, you don't have to build the stuff yourself. I'm going to have to build all these things myself.
Right.
Let's now flash forward into the future. You can't animate things as complexly in Premiere, but these relativistic things you've already got pretty much on lock.
True. That is one really nice thing about Premiere. You obviously do have some boundaries about how complex your animation is going to be, and how smoothly you're going to get there, I guess is maybe a good way to phrase it. If you're trying to make something with a lot of moving parts, Premiere is probably not the place for it, but you can do a lot of stuff in here. And particularly if you are trying to get things to stick to another element or to stick to the frame, Premiere is actually really capable in this. And so either folks that are more from the editor side, who maybe are a little apprehensive about diving into some of the nerdier stuff that you're going to be showing in After Effects, this is totally for you. But also, maybe you are really comfortable in After Effects already, but sometimes you just want the thing to work and you don't want to have to build it all from scratch. Understand that these options exist in here for exactly that reason.
Yeah, and we wanted to make sure that we get to the Premiere stuff kind of quickly so that the people who came here for a Premiere stream aren't running away because we are not responding to their desires.
Yeah, look how responsive we are.
Exactly. I'm being kind by by doing this.
Okay, so the first thing I want to show before I even get to this graphics is I assume most people know about this, but Premiere, of course, does have an auto reframe capability. I personally would not really try to use that for graphics too much. There are some times where you could probably use this effectively, but I grabbed a clip here that has, a lot of back and forth across the frame because it seemed like that would be a good example here. So I'm just going to grab this clip from Adobe Stock. I'm just going to drop it into its own new timeline. Here we go. And then if you come up to the sequence menu, you have this auto reframe sequence. And so it's going to ask you what you want to do with it, what new aspect ratio you want to put it into. You can make a totally custom one if you're like that. I'm just going to turn this into a vertical video because that's, typically what's being asked for, right? So we do have the square, the 4x5, and next month when Instagram changes its layout again, maybe we'll get some other size, and that's when you can use custom.
Kyle, it's like listening to the air being squeezed out of a balloon. I can feel you deflating.
I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend that I love vertical videos for a lot of reasons, but they are a thing that exist, and we have to deal with them.
I had a laugh when. Maybe it's not as much common of a format, but I think it was like a 3x4 or 4x3. I'm like, oh yeah, the way TV used to be.
Yeah.
miss me with those specs.
Yeah. Yeah, you know what? Maybe that's a good for custom here. If you're going for an old 4x3 look, that because you need to fit it into a old TV that I don't know, whatever. Anyway, there are some options about motion tracking here, depending on what your clip contains. I'm just going to use the default here. And then you get some options here. And then all you have to do is click create, and you just wait for a few seconds here. There's a little bar down in the very bottom right, and it actually went pretty fast. I did run this earlier, so it probably held on to those results, but it still went like in under 10 seconds here. And so now I'll just play the sequence, and you can see it does a pretty good job of keeping our subject all centered up. And so if you do need to make a few different size cuts from a video, it's certainly worth trying this. If you do have more graphics-oriented bits, you may need to reformat those, and that's what I'm going to be showing you here, at least within Premiere. So nonetheless, hopefully that's helpful if you didn't know that it existed. So let's close these down. And we're going to be diving into the Essential Graphics panel to build stuff, which is, of course, where you build all your text and you can add logos and stuff like that. First thing I'm going to do is actually change my workspace, because right now I'm in the Essentials, which is kind of my go-to for like an everyday, standard. Look, I'm lying. I use 2 monitors most of the time, but if I need a single screen thing that's a very default, this is what I go to.
Kyle's living that many monitors lifestyle.
Yep. So the biggest issue here is that Essential Graphics and Effect Controls are stacked on top of each other, and that's not going to be very useful when we actually start trying to animate these. So I'm going to come up to Window, Workspaces, and choose either Graphics or Captions and Graphics. Just has one other panel in it. So either of those is going to give you the same thing here. And now you have your Effect Controls over here on the left and Essential Graphics over here on the right. So this is very much good space for building that kind of stuff. Just in case you're not super familiar with the Essential Graphics panel, when you create text layers, they get put into this thing called Essential Graphics, and this is kind of like a little mini Photoshop right here. These are layers. Let me just quickly move one thing over the other. See how responsive is sitting above we are, and that's because right here in these layers, there we go. It pays attention to the layering in this little menu right here. So be aware of that. Let me just undo that a few times to get back to the size that I want. When you start putting more stuff in here, you do need to be aware of that vertical layering, just like any other design app. And while I'm probably not going to get too into this today, I just want to point out a few other features here. You can create groups, which can be really handy if you are building something more complicated in here, and that can help you organize things. Of course, you can rename all of these to or actual names if you're so inclined. And once you start importing actual graphics, and some of these you can like matte graphics or videos with text layers and things like that, the grouping becomes more relevant. So you can kind of help hide things from being matted if you want. So we'll see if I have time to get into that, but I just wanted to kind of like quickly throw some of those thoughts out. A couple other little random things that might just be helpful while we're working in here. If your program monitor has a little wrench here, and there's a thing right down here, snap in program monitor, so that when you're moving around things like text items that you might want to snap to the center or something like that, this is really handy to use for that design purpose here in Premiere. This is more recent from a couple years ago, but you do have rulers, Control or Command R, and you can drag out guides just like After Effects and the design apps. So you can be a little more precise in here than you might expect. Oh, and of course you can right click on these, edit guide, and set them at a very specific place if you want. So these guides can all be set up and just help your designs be a little cleaner in here.
Well, those are there was a huge help for me doing things. I can be a little bit fastidious with my where graphic go type of problems. I'm very used to be able to snap things together. But it can be really helpful, especially when you're going from, oh, I've got to batch all of these things. I wish they were all in the same place. Oh, here we go. I've got all my rulers and my guides exactly the way I want. Load them up. Enjoy. It's helpful.
Yeah. Let's see. I've got a couple. There's a handful of other little tips we're going to do while we're building these. One thing I will call out is that these text layers are and shapes that you can build in here as well. Let me just create an ellipse here just so that you can see we have shapes that you can create here. You can also draw with this little tool. These are all vector, meaning we can scale these up and they will stay clean and crispy. Not crispy. I mean, sharp? I don't know. Yeah, whatever you want. One really important thing to point out is that when you're using these, something that was created in Essential Graphics and has the potential to be vector and clean like that, it will have in your Effect Controls panel something called vector motion. Now, maybe a little confusingly, it also has the regular motion controls right here. And if you were just dealing with something like this is just an image, it only has motion. So this is the motion that's on every single clip. But when you're using something that has the possibility of being vector, then it has vector motion. And the difference is, if I scale this up with the regular one, we're going to see, blah, looks terrible, right?
Stop that. Stop doing that.
Yeah. But if I scale it up with the vector scale, it stays all crisp and clean.
Oh my
so
goodness.
If you're an After Effects person, this is the equivalent to using the continuous rasterization when you've imported Illustrator files.
Yeah, and people might be like, inside of After Effects, there's quite an analogy to if you had a shape layer, all layers have scale, the contents have a scale, the groups within have scale. Like it's scales on scales on scales. It's turtles all the way down.
So I just want to make sure that we all kind of understood some of those things. There's a lot of other good stuff in the Essential Graphics panel. And, if you're not too familiar with it, I definitely encourage you to dive in here. There's a lot of alignment tools, for example. So if I grab both of these, you can, align to different things. If I, for example, grab multiple things, now I can decide, am I aligning to both of these to the video frame? Am I aligning them to the frame as a group, or aligning them to the selection, which would mean to one another? So there's a lot of like handy stuff in here. Okay. And then each object has its own transform controls, which again are separate from the sort of clip transform controls. So yada, yada, yada. This deeper than I'm going to have time to go today.
Yeah. I was going to say, Kyle, I'm going to have to cut you off in like
I know,
10,
right?
10 to 12.
I mean, look, this is the thing. We got to know what we're doing. Okay. But crucially, let me turn off that snapping here so that I can kind of move these freely. Crucially, we want to know how to connect things together, right? Mm-hmm. Though one thing I want to show you real quick before I do that is down here at the bottom. Every piece of text has this little, you get fill and stroke, but you also have a background down here. So let me turn this on, and then I'm going to make this a brighter color, almost our brand pink, pretty close. And looky there, it is a box around the text. And right here, you can set the opacity, and you can set the padding, and you can round the corners if you want. So if literally all you need is to put a box around your text easily, there are presets and stuff in After Effects to do it easily, but understand that Premiere has this. It's right here. You don't need to think about it at all. And this interacts with the other things that we're about to do, so you can easily work with text here and box it out. Let me, though, show you one thing before I deal with responsive here. So because this is kind of all part of that same thing, I made a second line here, and now it boxes the whole thing in, right? But what if you want it to actually respond to the length of each line? Well, here's another little hidden thing. Come up here to the hamburger menu, text layer preferences. You can set it to all lines is the default, or per line. So it will do that. You actually need to make a new text layer before it will do that. But here is a second one. And now it pays attention to the individual line length. So if that's what you want, that's how to find it.
Secret hamburger menu.
Yep, secret hamburger menu. Tasty. I'm gonna go ahead and set this back to all lines here. Just kind of get myself back to where
monster style.
Yeah.
Animal style? I don't know.
Yeah, whatever.
We don't have Shake Shack up here.
Muppets animal.
Yes.
Yeah. So, I wanted to make sure I showed you that, because that's part of, putting boxes around things is pretty common, and it's very easy in here. Okay, so we want this responsive to follow we are, okay? So when I select an object in here, be it text or a graphic of some kind that I put in here, you get this little thing right here that says responsive design position. And then you can pin to, and it's the video frame by default, but if you have at least one other thing in here, you can pin an object to that other thing, okay? So I'm going to choose we are, being my other text layer, and then you have this little kind of crosshair thing right here, and you're telling Premiere, I want to look at that edge of the thing and respond accordingly. Let's go ahead and pin this to the right side, just because I think that'll make a lot of sense here. And you can see it kind of gives, it's a little hard to see in here, and you can't zoom in and out quite as easily in Premiere, but you get this little kind of tick mark here. It's showing you like, this is what it's looking at, okay? And so right now, this word, even though it's all the way down here, it's looking at the right side of we are. So if I were to change this, now it's, you know, it's following the length of this layer because it's looking at the right side of it, okay? And so this is how you can start sticking things together like this. You could, of course, tell it to follow, say, I'll just click back off of this, the left side and the bottom. And now if we are gets a second line, oh, well, I messed something up here. We are responsive because I did it to the video frame. Got to make sure that you're paying attention to what you pin to. So I want to pin to those edges and then nothing on the video frame here. Yep. Okay, there we go. So if I add another line to we are here, man, I cannot type. It'll move everything down every time you do it, right? Now I could pin both of these to the video frame if I wanted to, or in a case like this, I would probably pin one word to the other word, you know, if in case it needs to expand, and then I'm going to have we are actually pinned to the video frame. So let's go ahead and move this, and this is a way to effectively parent your text layers together, even though there's otherwise no parenting here.
Yeah,
and so,
like pinning is like parenting.
Yes.
If the parenting was a bit more extreme.
Yes, exactly.
Because there is like, if you pin the sides, it's going to respond to both those sides. What does that mean? Well, it's going to stretch itself out to do that stuff.
Yeah.
Right?
And I probably should show that real quick. If I do it to both sides here, so responsive is now pinned to both sides and the bottom. So when we are gets longer, it's going to stretch that second text layer to follow the rules that I gave it, regardless of how good it looks.
And I think maybe that's one of the big things about pinning, right? It's like you're stabbing pins in it. The edge is moving. Therefore, I'm going to drag. This is what happens when the two pins come apart.
Yeah. So let's take we are, and I'm going to move it up to the top right corner. I'm just kind of ballparking here. And then I could tell that to be pinned to the video frame. And in this case, if I wanted it to be pinned to the, I said right, you knew I meant left. So if I'll then touch the left and the top. And so if I were making this into a Mogurt, or if I were to copy paste this into another timeline in a different size, which I'm about to do, then it's going to respect this and stay in this corner. Because if I were to put this in, say, a vertical video, obviously this is mostly off the screen in that case, right? So how about I plop this into a vertical one here, and then let's take a look at what it does. There we go. It went right up to the corner. Now, this one, kind of like what Evan was showing, this is a ratio. So this one doesn't have nearly as much vertical space. And so this little amount might be, say, 5% of the frame here. But that 5% is, looks like more in this case because there's more stretchy. So you do need to kind of be mindful of what you're building and how you're going to be using it and all that. But those are kind of the basics of getting everything pinned here. Let me see if there's any other, it's already, half the show's over here. So let me see what else I can, let me show responsive design time, and then we can kick it over to you. How about that?
Perfect. I was going to say one more thing, just one more thing.
Okay, so once you start animating these, which, by the way, you can animate the clip as a whole from here in the Essential Graphics, or when you touch one of these layers, then it gets its own individual transform properties, and that's all reflected over here, and you'll get keyframes and all these properties over here in the effect controls as well. Once you start animating those, which you can just touch these little icons to activate keyframes, by the way, then you're going to end up with something like this. Ooh, and look, this circle right here is also responsive in this case. That circle is looking at the title. So if I were to change this to, Hotline, you'll see that circle is going for a ride as well. Now, I want to make it so that every time I use this clip, which I'm going to turn into a Mogurt in this case, I want it to always hang on to the in and out animation, regardless of how long I make this thing, okay? So what you do for that is called responsive design time. It's right over here. When you have nothing selected specifically in here, then that will show up. And so you can set a duration right here, or you can also set it kind of manually in the, let me set this clip to a different color so you can see a little better. Purple. Well, I guess it's still blue in here regardless. Okay. There's a little handle here, but it's probably very hard for you to see. So you can set the duration over here, and then you'll get this gray area, which I ballparked pretty well. You'll see it enclosed all of the keyframes that I made there. So you can be as precise as you want. And then you just want to make sure that you find any outgoing keyframes. Here, it's a little easier to see. There's a little blue tab. I can just drag. And so now that responsive animation is set. Okay, so now here's my in animation, and then my middle part, which has nothing, and then my out. And what that means is that anytime I use this now, I can actually stretch the clip, and it's going to hold on to that in out in the exact same durations, but kind of accordion the middle of it to accommodate that. So if I were to save this off as a Mogurt, by going up to Graphics and Titles, Export as Motion Graphics Template, then I'd be able to use this in Premiere or send it off to someone else to use, and they would always get all the various responsive features that I set up in here, including that timing, which is really handy.
Nailed it. There we go. So cool. We're at the halfway point. Let's go back into After Effects. Premiere time over.
Oh,
shut it down. No, that's just the tip of things that you could do in Premiere. So pin things to stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's so. How are we going to do that in After Effects?
Yeah, if you want to build all that from scratch the hard way.
In a sense, right? We sort of have to recreate that type of system inside of After Effects.
Yeah.
So, step one, we have to be able to give ourselves the ability to choose these corners. And when you're designing anything that is responsive, you have to think what shall be in response to which, and by what features and what rules. You got to make up the rules. So we've got some helpful things to make that happen. So there are things like the drop-down menu. So you can grab a drop-down menu caterl right here. And I've called this one Reference Corner. Which corner am I interested in? Now, I've done more than corners. Top left, top right, bottom left, bottom right, middle center. Playing all the classics, all the big ones, right? Your classic cardinal directions. Maybe you want middle center. Maybe you want top middle, whatever, right? You've got to figure it out. But thing number one, if this layer has to respond in keeping to those reference corners, what do we have to change about it to make it do what we want? Two things that I want to have happen.
You are really big on those WHs today.
What?
Why, Evan?
My whim is to have wherewithal to pronounce my W's. So I would assume this layer, if we are referencing based off of the top corner, I'd want it to move up like kabloink, right? I'd want it to be like that. And so if we're going to go top left, it should reference off of this corner and should be referencing off of the corner of the frame. So there are two things that need to happen. I need to move the anchor point of this up to here, and then I need to move the layer up to there so that if it's doing anything, were it scaling, positioning, whatever, it's all going to be based on how it understands where that corner is. Now, where is that? All right, let's go over to...
You said it wrong.
Sorry. Where...
Thank you.
Where? Turning into Nicole Byer over here. So where is my info panel? There we go. Ba-bing. So info panel will now tell me when I hover over there. Oh, and I should be on the... Is my face covered? No, that's not this stream. Good. That's a different stream. So if we look at our info panel and I hover up over there, the XY coordinate, that is 0, 0 up in that corner. Similarly on layers, that is considered 0, 0. And so, of course... frame width, frame height is the bottom corner. Positive numbers are down. Normal. Positive numbers not up. Negative numbers up. And So what must we do to move this anchor point? So really, I'm going to come into the anchor point, hold down Option, click on this. Let's put in an expression. What are we doing? We are looking for a variable called maybe menu. You can name this whatever you'd like, but we're going to point to the droppy downy menu, and let's take the value of that. So the value is 1, 2, 3, 4, etc., which is the number of the menu item being called. So top left is 1, and middle center is 5. Unlike other things, this one starts at 1. Right? Normal.
Yeah.
This is normal and good, not confusing at all. So,
but helpfully those numbers are in there when you create the options.
So how do we get this to, say, switch between different cases, right? We need to point this to say, hey, switch based on the menu, and then I'll probably never remember the syntax to make this particularly good, so I'm going to copy and paste it from a previous one when I did do good. In the anchor point in here, there we are. Click, click. There we go. Because we're tight on time, I don't want to have to do it all the way through. So the switch expression is saying switch based on which value. Well, the menu value is how I've declared it here. So basically it's saying when it's 1, do what? When it's 2, do what? And so on. When it's 5,
when you've got more than like 2 or 3 things, you should really use this method.
As soon as you're grabbing the drop down, grab the switch case, because it is a finite list. It's an exclusive. Sorry, exclusive. So this is an exclusive list. It can only be 1, 2, 3, etc. But what commands are we giving this? So everything lives between the case and the break. And this is just saying, hey, when we're on case 1, your value is 0, 0. That's up, over. Oh, that's where it goes, right? If it is case 2 is, in this case, the top right. Well, this is an image layer. So we can read the width of the layer, comma 0. So horizontally the width and then 0. So let's just go ahead and test how well that's working out. So we'll just go top right, boink. See, it's moved over there. The whole layer has moved because the layer slides behind the anchor point when this is changing. What's case 3? Case 3 is bottom left. Boop. There we go. Goes right there. And it doesn't make that sound. Evan makes that sound whenever those things.
I mean, it could. We could probably talk to Adobe and see about that.
Yeah, Kyle, let's start a petition to get your and my voice put in as Easter eggs. We want to be as famous as the sheep. Put Evan and Kyle in the program. All the beeps and boops, that's what's going to go in there. So here, right, bottom left is 0, comma, height, positive numbers down. And then, of course, width, comma, height, case 5, that's the other corner. The last one, case 5, let's get a little math into your life, right? The half the width, half the height, that'll put you into the middle center, and kabam, kabam, there you go. So we have now forced the anchor point into these places based on the reference corner.
Half the width, half the height, that will put your object right.
Boom, it rhymes, so it must be true. Bingo, bango, ha-ta-ta, to quote Al Rafai. So there we go. We're halfway there. Let's go back to referencing the top left. What should be happening once we are going into the top left? I want it to move up there. So we could just take the same logic that we just deployed on here to the position, clunk that in. And so what's going to happen here? Well, 0, 0 takes us up to 0, 0. Hey, that's great. And it is not the width of the layer we're interested in. We're interested in the comp.width. So that should send us over to the other corner. Let's find out. Top left, top right. Oh, we got an error. What is it saying? Comp. Kyle, what have I done here? What am I doing?
It's hard for me to read your text on what I can see, so kind of on your own.
That's true. You can't see my screen.
I can see it clearly 20 seconds ago.
Yeah. Effect up. I'm just going to copy and paste it from the other one. The one.
Yeah, that's okay.
Do it from the one that you did before because it will be right and good. All right. Grab the position. There's also, Evan hastily looks at the time, realizes that there's a lot of stuff to cover. Okay, so let's get into the position. Click. Why is this giving me trubs? Oh, there's a null that I had thrown into the mix on the other one. Here's your problem. Here's your problem.
Almost as if your code was referencing something that wasn't there.
That's true. Let's go into the completed version, and this will help us out. That way I don't have to keep doing that. So this is referencing a bunch more things. I'm bringing in, of course, that menu is here, but I'm also pulling in the offset values, and then I'm calling a width and a height that are not the width and height of the composition. Now, the reason I'm doing that in this case is because what if we turn this into a mogurt, right? Well, the mogurt can't read how big a sequence is. We have to be able to dial it in. Anything you want to put in a mogurt, you must make into a value that you can edit and change. So that's why just having it as W and H pointing to a null's width and height. This is also going to be instructive in here because you can see me changing the size of this, and it kind of makes sense that this box is changing and this is changing relative to that. So hopefully that makes sense for instructive purposes in here. Then we've got these.
I know we're short on time, but I do want to make sure folks understand that. That is one. I certainly wish that it had this capability, but if you build a mogurt in After Effects that is aware of the frame size in After Effects, that will not be aware of the sequence frame size in Premiere. It just doesn't have that capability. So you do need to build in some way, like Evan just did, to adjust that in Premiere.
Yeah, new width, who dis? Like it doesn't know. So in here, we've got two types of like offsets that are happening. So a relative type of offset, and then some absolute types of offsets, right? So this is our absolute offset. There is some finicky stuff to make a relative offset work. More on that later. But the positional place that you want to put this, where this wants to live positionally, if we say I want it to live in the top right, well, it's going up into the top right here, and you can see that the logic of where we want it to end up is right here. So it's showing up at that particular place. Now, there's more that we want to do. So I'm using this case to say a variable named reference is now going to be 0, 0, or width, comma 0, or 0, comma height, or width, comma height, or width divided by 2, height divided by 2, right? So that is going to get us to that position. That's the raw position. That's the place we're going to go. If we did nothing else, we're trapped at that place. So that's why we're adding in, say, the offset absolute to this. So that's just a static number here, identified by a point, negative this way, negative that way. Now we are absolutely that far away. I'm going to just, I
was going to say that's driving me bonkers.
Get that out of here. It causes us a lot of anxiety to see those things around. It's hard to focus. So if I start to change the size of this, there we go. That layer, right, is moving based on where that is. And it looks the most impressive when it's just based on the middle. So we'll just go ahead and change that into the middle center, like that. And remember, because it is an absolute value, it is a static number of pixels that we have moved it. So set that back to 0. Let's talk about the other way that you can bounce this thing around. Let's go into the top left, and hopefully this will make sense. I have set up an offset that is relative. So if we go through all of this, again, it's a point control that's bringing this in. In order to compute relativity, I need to then say, well, I'm going to use a linear, and you can do this in many, many ways. You could be using division, any of this stuff. But I've decided that I'm just going to use a linear to remap inputs of negative 100 to 100 to negative the width of the comp to the full width of the comp. So this is a pretty, I'm going to say, I was trying to keep this math light. I'm trying to not force people to divide things with their brains. And I'm like, well, as this goes from negative 100 to 100, if this is simply being mapped to that value. If I were to put this at 50, where is this kind of going on that type of thing, right? Like it is moving at that particular 50% place. If this is at 25, then it's 25% of the way across here. And if we go
and to clarify, these ratios are in relative to that null that we see there, not the actual frame right now.
No, these are relative to this little box. So this box is kind of standing in for the size of the thing. If you wanted this to reference instead the composition width, make sure you're doing comp.width, comp.height. Instead, I've linked it up to this manual, width and height slider that makes it easier for us to demonstrate and crank those values. So it is at that percentage. And so a more robust way of understanding this would be, well, let's combine the two ideas together. We just say, hey, we're going to add the absolute and the offset in here. And really, we're running through this thing pretty quick, but if you want to get your hands on this project file and dissect it and make sure you see how it goes, motiondesignhotline.com, you'll be able to download this. I might even save it out as a preset, so it's easy for you to just apply to layers.
That'd be handy.
That might be the most helpful version of this.
These are usually up about 15, 20 minutes after the show's over. So
yeah. TBD, we'll figure it out. So I think that kind of covers off the position, right? We can make this relative to that as much as we'd like. Now, you might be saying, Evan, what if I want this to be relative to other layers? What if I want this to be relative to that? Well, like I say, this is relative to the width and height of the place that it is. This could be the composition's width and height. This could be the parent's width and height. In this case, we're doing the simplest version of the thing by saying, let's use an image layer. And the image layer has easily accessible width and height. I keep saying height. Look, maybe this is what I say.
You're adding H's to everything today. It's just how it goes.
I'm having a time. So you could do this to a shape layer. Shape layers have a source rect that you will reference. It's more complicated because the relationship between where the stuff is and where the layer is it has a second layer of obfuscation about it. So finding the true location of these things can be a bother. If you're just starting out, start with image layers. You will be happier for it.
That is one hiccup, is that shape layers and text layers, which are the two things you're most likely to use for these kinds of positioning relationships, both have kind of their own weird, like text layer anchor point isn't in the center of the layer, it's at the baseline of the text. And shape layers have the ability to have internal transforms. So there's some additional layers of complexity there.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And do you know about the throw expression, which is hyper handy? Throw, I believe try and catch are the ones that we tend to use when trying to catch errs. Because you can say, if you have do this. Anyway, I must not be derailed. I must not be thrown from my track. So we've got this thing going into corners. That's working out great. What if we need this to also scale, right? So let's fire up the old S for scale, and let's see what I have placed in here, why it's more cases. We're cracking the case today. So in this case, one of the more difficult things to deal with scale-wise is you sort of need to have an original scale that it comes from, right? So if you're designing in a 16:9, then your numbers will be based on that frame size, because it is important for this to have an original place that you come from so that you know where you're going to go. And all these ratios are based on that, basically. So in here, we've got, we're looking at the scale of that menu, that drop-down menu, based on what? The width or the height or the average of them, depending on what's changing. So if a layer is supposed to reference the frame, and the frame is changing in its width, okay, so the width has changed. I should be scaling you based on the width. The height hasn't changed, so I don't really care what's going on. Like, when we're thinking about relativity, that's a huge problem. We'll say that, well, the thing only got wider, so now you're taking up more vertical space. Excuse me? I don't think so.
Yeah. You have to kind of tell it which one has priority.
Sure. Or we could do like a max or a min, or the high or the low value. We could take an average of the two values and to try to figure it out. But then if you take an average, you're really saying, well, if the area of the composition gets bigger, then get bigger in response to it. One of the problems with that is, let's say we're going from a dominantly horizontal thing to a dominantly vertical thing, and the area has not changed at all. Right? It's the same area, but now I should look different because I'm hanging off the edge of the table here, but the table is the same area. Oh no. That's what layers say. They think of their world as being on a table, and people are going to come eat them off of the table.
This qualifies as sound effects, speaking as layers in first person.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I like to personify all of the layers because, as I said, I am a benevolent dictator of the entire After Effects file. So in here, I have decided that I'm going to set up something called an X ratio and a Y ratio. That is going to be the width divided by 1080 and the Y ratio being height divided by 1920. Those are the original values that we started with. And that's the only reason that those values are being used, because I originally would have designed this based on the vertical frame format. Therefore, I need to think about things in those terms because I already scaled them to fit with a certain way of being. Now, all of that is to say, if you were going to think about this totally differently, your rules might say, okay, one edge is here, the other edge should always live at a certain distance from something else, exactly the same way that it works in Premiere, right? That's a totally different type of logic because it requires the measurement of where am I,
Right.
Where is my first edge relative to the wall? Okay, how could we find that? Well, we could find the anchor point, and we could just say this place's position minus, the comp width. That's going to give us where we are. Where's my other edge? Well, I know how long I am, so therefore, if I were to subtract that from how far I am from that wall and from the comp width, that'll tell me where my other edge is, data-wise. And then I need to scale myself then based on the difference between where that was relative to this and the other one. That's why I didn't do that. Because
it gets to be a lot. We could spend a whole other episode just dealing with that particular issue right there.
That's right. That's because I'm now sound like an insane person. This is the easier version of this to sort of wrap your brain around, that we're really just taking the ratio that the width kind of had. If it was the original, these numbers would be 1, right? 1080 divided by 1080, 1. 1920 divided by 1920, 1. And we then take that and we just say, hey, just make the value times that ratio, right? Because if it gets smaller, it's going to be a point something. If it gets bigger, it's going to be a 1 point something. And there you go. That's how you can calculate the sales tax of your layers doing this. Like that times 1 point whatever, that's going to get you what you want from this. And being able to say, well, now I'm going by the width, now I'm going by the height, like that is pretty useful. The value times is allowing us to just manually scale it and then start messing with this stuff to our heart's content. So you can see when I scale that, it does that. When I scale this, it does nothing. Hey, we're nailing it.
Until you get
then
small
we're
enough,
into trouble town. So it's a really base level sort of coming up with your considerations, picking what is going to be relative to what, where do I scale from, where do I move from, and then determining the methodology you want to use to alter those values. In your rules that maybe you want to set up, you don't care about offset relativity because you're going to be doing only absolute relativity. Or maybe you don't care about absolute relativity. You only care about the relative relativity of things. Oh boy.
You have to boil it down to what are you or the user going to touch, and so that's what drives whatever you're going to build.
Yeah, and scale the same way, right? We talked about those two very fundamentally different ways of thinking about how big is this layer. And those are kind of the big things. Oh boy, Kyle, I thought we were going to have time to go back to your screen, but
I know we had a couple questions too, but I think those will have to get saved for next week at this point.
That's true. We are on here every Monday. Hopefully this has been a useful thing. We're going to collect those quandaries, those questions that you brought to us that we couldn't quite get to. And maybe next week is a leftovers episode. So
I think it just might be.
Yeah, that'll be we're going to get Paul Giamatti in here. He's going to tell us about his Thanksgiving Day leftovers. It's going to be exactly what you think it is. But yeah, if you have other problems if you have other problems, if you have other questions based on this stuff that we just presented today, get at us. Get at me at EC Abrams. Get at Kyle at Kylosaurus Rex. We're on the social medias. You can send things into our form at motiondesignhotline.com. You can get at us. The links are right to that in the description area here. Trying to think, those are probably the best ways to send things to us.
Yeah.
Our DMs are open pretty much everywhere, so get at us in those spaces, in those places. I think Kyle, you are copying and pasting this stuff furiously from the chat. So
Yeah.
Oh boy,
I got it.
Anyway, oh boy, I'm looking at the time. We don't want to get cut off. So thank you all so much for watching. When you're out there in the world, stay creative, be kind to each other, and we will see you all around the internet. Bye for now.
Thanks, everybody.
Whew.
I think Evan's going to collapse.
I gotta stop saying code stuff so fast.